I spoke with Republican Congressman Michael McCaul from Texas. He is chairman emeritus of the House Homeland Security and Foreign Affairs Committees. He told me he also does not think that an Iranian attack on the United States was imminent and that American boots on the ground will require congressional approval. Chairman McCaul, first I'd like you to react to this announcement today from the head of the National Counterterrorism Center. He said he's resigning over the Iran war. Joe Kent said in a statement that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, it's deeply disappointing that the head of the National Counterterrorism Center has resigned really over a political statement against the policy of the president. I disagree with his assessment. I think Iran has been a imminent threat since 1979, and we do know that currently they were rebuilding their nuclear capabilities. They do have enough enriched uranium to deliver a dirty bomb to Israel with their ballistic missiles and other countries in the region. So I think this is an ideological split, perhaps, within my party, taking the side against the president, unfortunately.
The Speaker of the House today said that President Trump, if President Trump had waited to attack Iran, he said, we would have had mass casualties of Americans. Do you agree with that? How close do you think the Iranians were to attacking the United States, not Israel, but the United States?
To attack the United States, they would need the intercontinental ballistic missiles. They do have an ICBM program. They have not fully developed that. And that was part of the negotiations between Jared Kushner, Witkoff, and the Iranians, was to eliminate ICBM capability. They did have short-term range capabilities in the region, but they could not reach the United States. I do think the terror threat today now inside of the United States, though, as a result, is very on a heightened level, which again is why I find it very disappointing that Mr. Kent decided to resign. We need a new leader that agrees with the president's policy on this with the NCTC.
But to be clear, you thought an attack from Iran on the United States was imminent?
I do not. I think that the ICBM capability would be an imminent threat to the United States, but they have not developed that capability. That's something they've been working on.
Right.
They do have the ballistic missiles that they've fired that they could deliver a dirty bomb to, but they didn't have the ICBM capabilities developed. Not to say, though, that Iran's not going to try to inspire attacks against Americans in the United States. We've seen that happen now over 4 times now, including my hometown of Austin.
But if an attack on the United States was not imminent, why did this war need to happen now?
I think because Iran has been a long-term threat in the region. And if we want normalization, if we just shift, I mean, first of all, the military has done a phenomenal job. They're close to achieving their objective. We're probably weeks away from that. I think the president did both the next generation and future generations a huge favor by eliminating this threat once and for all.
The president also said today that he was not afraid of sending ground troops to Iran. We would need ground troops in Iran in order to do 2 things that the president has publicly talked about potentially doing. One is taking over Karg Island, where 90% of Iranian oil is processed. And then the other is removing the nearly 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium that's buried underground. And that, as you just said, is a real threat, ultimately, long-term, to the safety and security of the United States. Have you spoken to the president about sending in American ground troops, and would you support that?
I think ultimately that is the president's call. I think the Congress would have to weigh in on that, certainly. Putting our troops on the ground in Iran is a totally different objective here. I think right now the military's objective is to completely destroy their nuclear capability, naval, to the drone activity. Boots on the ground would create a magnet and a target, if you will, for the jihadists that I would be very concerned about personally. The question is whether we're involved with regime change and nation building. We have a good track record, Elizabeth, of breaking things in the Middle East. We don't have a good track record of fixing things and nation building. I don't know if the American people are really supportive of getting that bogged down. The amphibious assault vessels with the Marines going to that region, to me, does indicate that that is a contingency planning event that they are considering.
They are considering sending Marines on the ground in Iran to either seize Karg Island.
The fact that from Indo-PACOM we're seeing amphibious assault vessels and Marines going to the region does indicate to me that there is some sort of operation that's already being planned in a contingency event that we believe Karg Island needs to be occupied by U.S. troops.
To be clear, I just interviewed Senator John Fetterman, who supports the war in Iran, but said his red line was boots on the ground. He would absolutely not support sending in the Marines to Karg Island or anybody else into Iran to look for that uranium. You are not a hard no, or are you a hard no on that?
Look, it depends on, these are a lot of hypotheticals, but a significant troop presence in Iran itself, I think, would warrant Congress doing its job under the War Powers Act. The administration has complied with the War Powers Act. You know, as the former chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, we are the committee charged with the authorization of use of military force. That would be taking this to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And I do think the Congress would see it that way as well. Significant troop presence in Iran would be a game changer.
It would be a game changer in many ways. Chairman Michael McCaul, really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.